Israeli protesters have stormed not one, but 2 IDF bases after 9 reservist soldiers were detained by military police. According to their defense lawyer, the soldiers were held on suspicion of sexual abuse of a Palestinian imprisoned at the Sede Temen detention center in southern Israel. But their arrest triggered an angry response from supporters, including members of Israel's parliament, the Knesset. As news of the soldiers' arrest broke, hundreds of protesters gathered outside the base, waving Israeli flags and calling for the release of the soldiers. At the same time, other soldiers on the base refused to cooperate with the military police, barricading themselves inside the compound. According to Haaretz, some even used pepper spray on the police trying to enter. A second wave of protesters stormed through the centre's outer gates, remaining there for several hours before police escorted them out. Just to be clear, the protesters were not demonstrating against the alleged sexual abuse of a Palestinian prisoner. The victim of that abuse was described by Haaretz as having severe injuries to an intimate body part, injuries that left him unable to walk. No, those Israelis were protesting the idea that IDF soldiers should be held to account for committing what amounts to rape on a prisoner. One protester told Reuters why he was there.
The soldiers in this country are a consensus. If they touch our soldiers, we'll build a shield wall. The people will rise up against the government, be it left or right or whatever. Nobody can touch our soldiers. Not the people who died defending us, not my friends who died defending us, not my friends who still stay in the Soroka and hospital. We're here for our soldiers, not for our politicians, not for the terrorists. No, we're here to let everybody know. Nobody will touch our soldiers, our brothers in arms.
Later, around 1,200 further protesters gathered outside the Beit Lid IDF base where the 9 soldiers had been taken for questioning. Dozens of them were able to break into the base. Some were masked and armed, and the Times of Israel reports that others carried guns and wore IDF uniforms. According to Israeli police, the mob was soon dispersed. Amazingly, no arrests were made at either site. In response to the protests and break-ins, some Israeli politicians offered mild criticism. Defense Minister and potential subject of an ICC arrest warrant, Yoav Gallant, said this. IDF regular and reserve fighters have been fighting fiercely for over 9 months in the most just war we have known in all our years of existence. I'm full of appreciation for the soldiers who carry out the complex and important task of imprisoning Hamas terrorists, vile terrorists with whom we will come to account and exhaust the law in the strictest way. The IDF will continue to act in accordance with the law. We must allow the authorised parties to carry out the necessary tests while maintaining the dignity of our soldiers. Even when angry, the laws bind everyone. Do not break into IDF bases and do not violate the laws of the State of Israel. Other members of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's cabinet expressed their support for the detained soldiers. This was the view of Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich. The civil protest around the terrible injustice towards the reservists in the Yemen field is justified, and I support it with all my heart. In contrast to the hypocritical left, who made breaking the law, refusing and burning the state a method for a year and a half, and the auspices of the Yamesh, we have a responsibility to the state. Therefore, I call on everyone to maintain the law and the integrity of the army and the people, not to break into the bases and not to confront our brothers, the soldiers and the police, and to main the borders of the protest. Meanwhile, Israel's National Security Minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, said this. The spectacle of military police officers coming to arrest our best heroes at Sede Temen is nothing less than shameful. I recommend that the Defense Minister, the IDF Chief of Staff, and the army authorities back the fighters and learn from the prison service. The summer camps are over, and patience for the terrorists are over. Fighters should get full backing. It's like a far-right galaxy brain meme, that series of those responses. Now, the Sede Temen detention center, where the Palestinian prisoner was allegedly sexually assaulted by 9 soldiers, has a long history of abuse of prisoners. Last month, a New York Times investigation revealed the base was filled with thousands of blindfolded and handcuffed Palestinian captives, many held without charge or legal representation. In April, Haaretz reported on a doctor at Sede Temen who had seen alleged widespread law-breaking in the treatment of Palestinian prisoners. The illegal acts he listed included routine amputation of detainees' legs due to handcuff injuries, keeping prisoners constantly in retreats and forcing them to defecate in diapers. We reported on those allegations at the time. Haaretz has also called for the closing of what it calls Israel's Guantanamo Bay later that month, following allegations of torture, as well as the death of 27 detainees over a period of mere months. I'm now joined by Dimi Reader, who is the national editor of The Lead and co-founder of the 972 magazine. Dimi, on those protesters that stormed the military base, can you give us some more detail on what you've heard about them, what they were chanting or demanding?
They were generally demanding that police and the authorities concentrate on fighting and prosecuting terrorists rather than their own soldiers, chanting in support of the war, in support of letting the army do its job, and so on and so forth. The rather new development was that they actually forcefully infiltrated a military base, which is quite unusual, and it's quite telling that they were allowed to get as far as they did. If Israeli leftists tried to do that, the response from police and the army would have been quite different, and obviously even more so if they were Palestinians. The other new thing was the amount of right-wing politicians, including some nationally known ones, directly confronting the army and, again, trespassing. And thirdly, the presence of armed men among the protesters, who appear to be reservists from the same unit that staffs the prison. We can't tell for sure because they were wearing balaclavas, but you could very much see that those men were wearing military fatigues, t-shirts, balaclavas, and carrying their army-issue weapons. They didn't point the weapons at anyone at any time, but they were certainly present in a very vivid way.
What does this say about the current climate in Israel, that there has been rioting to defend soldiers accused of sexual crimes against prisoners, and that rioting seems to involve, reservists, far-right politicians who are opposing the military police? Where does the power lie now?
I think the power is fracturing, and it's too soon to tell where it will eventually settle. The majority of power is still with the state. We shouldn't. This is probably the beginning of a process. We're not quite there. We're not in civil war of any sort. We're not in a collapse of the state. But it's certainly showing that society is fracturing, that the army discipline is fraying, which we've also seen in Gaza in terms of how soldiers behave there. And it's showing, I think, that it will be quite difficult domestically for Netanyahu to end the war on any terms that don't suit his far-right coalition partners.
Can you tell us a bit more about the response or apparent involvement of Israeli politicians within the rioting?
So on the ground, you had Tzvi Sukkot, who's a well-known settler activist before he was a member of the Knesset. You have Nissim Vaturi and a few other people belonging to the Likud and to other right-wing parties. The much more interesting involvement, or alleged involvement, is that of Itamar Ben-Gvir, who himself has a past of being convicted of support of terrorism and is now the police minister in Israel. The accusation, he's been accused by Defense Minister Yoav Gallant of ordering the police to stand down and not interfere. I would say he didn't necessarily have to do that for several reasons. One, it might have been a conscious decision by police to not to intervene forcefully unless they absolutely had to de-escalate. And if that was the strategy, it appears to have paid off in terms of no one was seriously physically hurt. And the riot hasn't escalated, and today has kind of fallen back to the usual level of demonstrations outside the perimeter of military bases and prisons. The other thing is that Ben-Gvir has been in control of the police for almost 2 years now, and he has been quite successful at, if not exactly taking over the police, but certainly promoting people who agree with him. And organizations don't necessarily need a written detailed order from whoever heads it up to anticipate what they would prefer and what would pay off for their own careers in the long term. And thirdly, of course, the Israeli police has been continually radicalized over the last few years by a variety of factors. They've long been underpaid, undertrained, They've been working ridiculous hours because of the continuous civil unrest and protests against Netanyahu's government in any way. They took a lot of the first impact of the Hamas attack on October 7th. An unprecedented number of police were killed. So they're generally, on the one hand, they're being alienated from a lot of the civil society in Israel on the one hand, and on the other hand, the power within the organization clearly lies to the right. So there are plenty of factors there that would make a direct order from Ben Gvir to stand down redundant.
These alleged sexual crimes are by no means the first reported abuse at Seder Timen. The military police were, of course, right to move on these, but why these? And why not any other abuse that has been reported at that prison?
I really can't say why they chose this one in particular. It might be simply that this was reported from within the system. Unlike other reports, which were journalistic reports and investigations by people like Hagar Shazaf at Haaretz and Yuval Avram at 972 Local Call, this was actually brought to the attention of the authorities by doctors in a hospital where the detainee was brought, and they examined him and said there is absolutely no way that this could have happened. These injuries could have happened naturally, or they were self-inflicted. So perhaps that made it more difficult to ignore it, or maybe the evidential basis was stronger because military police, perhaps even more than normal police, don't move unless they have. They're pretty sure that they can prosecute and convict, and this bar is higher within the Israeli military, but that very, very rarely prosecutes soldiers for violence against Palestinians. The particular manner in which they decided to move in has since been criticized. The detained soldiers are reservists, and arguments have been advanced that they could have been much more quietly picked up in their own homes separately and over a period of time, rather than military police showing up in force, also wearing balaclavas and very much staging it as a raid against armed dangerous suspect. And being met with this resistance from the other prison personnel. The military police is saying that they were trying to make sure that they get all the suspects at once and to prevent any of them from escaping or to prevent them from coordinating their stories. But it's undoubtedly going to be much of the focus of the conversation in Israel, and we'll hopefully learn more in the weeks to come.
Have there been any consequences for protesters as of yet?
None whatsoever. There have been no arrests, and there was one protester was detained. I'm not sure if he's still in detention after he broke into the second military base. But beyond that, there have been no consequences yet. Again, this could be simply police deciding we have the footage, we know who these people are, and we're going to pick them up later, rather than arrest them very publicly in the middle of a riot and risk prolonging it. I'm giving police the benefit of the doubt here. They are, again, notoriously kid-gloved with the Israeli far right, so it's more likely that there will be no consequence at all.